The ink tasted bitter and metallic on Olivia Bennett's tongue as she tested the nib of her latest fountain pen creation. A habit born from years of ensuring each instrument wrote smoothly before packaging it for sale. She stood in the cramped workshop behind her deceased father's Boston print shop, surrounded by the tools and materials that had sustained her through 3 years of widowhood and mounting debts that threatened to swallow everything she had left. The autumn of 1882 had brought cold winds and colder prospects, and the advertisement she'd answered 2 weeks ago felt like her last grasp at a life beyond these suffocating walls. Her father had taught her the craft of pen-making when she was barely 15, his skilled hands guiding hers as they shaped metal and carved handles from precious wood. He'd passed 5 months ago, leaving her with knowledge that fascinated men but made them uncomfortable when wielded by a woman. They wanted to buy her pens, but balked at the idea of purchasing them directly from her unmarried hands. Her late husband's family had taken everything they could legally claim after Thomas died of pneumonia, leaving her with only the workshop and its contents, which they deemed worthless. The letter had arrived on a Tuesday, written in a steady masculine hand that spoke of education and care. Yannick Walker, cattleman and landowner in La Junta, Colorado, sought a bride of reasonable temperament and practical skills. He made no promises of luxury, but offered stability, respect, and a home in the expanding West. Olivia had responded with honesty about her circumstances, her craft, and her need for a fresh beginning. His second letter had included travel funds and a photograph of a man with serious eyes and sun-weathered features, perhaps 30 years old, standing beside a fence with mountains visible in the distance. She packed her pens, her tools, her father's journals, and the few dresses she owned into 2 leather trunks. Her neighbor, Mrs. Halloway, wept as she helped Olivia prepare for the journey west, pressing a small Bible into her hands and making her promise to write. The train journey took 4 days of rattling progress through changing landscapes, from the industrial northeast through farmlands and prairies, until the mountains rose like ancient sentinels against an impossibly blue sky. La Junta sprawled along the Arkansas River in southeastern Colorado, a junction town where the Santa Fe Railroad brought commerce and travelers to the high plains. Olivia stepped off the train on a crisp October morning, with ink still faintly staining her lips from her nervous habit of testing the pen she'd tucked into her traveling coat. The platform bustled with activity as freight handlers unloaded goods and passengers rushed toward waiting carriages. She searched the crowd for the face from the photograph, her heart hammering against her ribs. What if he took one look at her plain features and practical dress and decided she wouldn't do? What if the reality of a mail-order bride disappointed him? Her fingers worried at the handle of her smaller trunk until she spotted him. Yannick Walker stood a head taller than most men on the platform, his broad shoulders wrapped in a worn leather coat that had seen many seasons. He held his hat in his hands, revealing dark hair touched with premature silver at the temples. His eyes, she noticed as he approached, were the color of strong coffee, and they studied her with an intensity that made her breath catch. "Miss Bennett." His voice carried a slight accent she couldn't quite place, something European mixed with Western American. "Yes, Mr. Walker." She extended her hand and he took it carefully, his palm calloused and warm. "Welcome to La Junta." He glanced at her mouth, and she realized with horror that she must have ink on her lips again. Her hand flew to her face, and she rubbed at the stain. "I'm sorry. I have a terrible habit. I make pens, you see, and I test them with my tongue to ensure the ink flows properly. It's been a long journey and I was anxious, so I kept testing the one in my pocket." The words tumbled out too quickly, and she forced herself to stop babbling. Something shifted in his expression, not quite a smile but a softening around his eyes. "You make pens, fountain pens." "My father taught me. I brought my tools if that's acceptable. I thought perhaps I could continue the work, maybe sell them to the general store or take mail orders." She straightened her shoulders, preparing for rejection. Instead, Yannick picked up her larger trunk with ease. A useful skill. The school teacher was just complaining last week about the quality of pens available at Morrison's store. "Come, I have the wagon waiting." Relief flooded through her as she followed him through the crowded platform. La Junta stretched before her with its mix of adobe buildings and wooden storefronts. A town caught between its Spanish past and American present. The street bustled with cowboys, merchants, railroad workers, and townspeople going about their Saturday business. Yannick's wagon was sturdy and well-maintained, pulled by two bay horses that looked equally well cared for. He loaded her trunks with efficiency and helped her onto the bench seat with a gentleness that surprised her. As they pulled away from the station, she studied the town with growing curiosity. "How far is your ranch?" she asked. "About 6 miles northeast of town. We'll stop at the preacher's house first if that suits you." "I thought you might prefer to marry today rather than wait, given propriety and such." He kept his eyes on the road as he spoke, but she noticed tension in his jaw. "That would be appropriate," she agreed, though her stomach fluttered with nervousness. She'd known this was the arrangement, but the reality of marrying a stranger felt suddenly overwhelming. They drove through the residential section of La Junta, where houses ranged from modest adobes to larger frame structures with pitched roofs. The preacher's home sat on a corner lot, painted white with a small garden that had been prepared for winter. Yannick helped her down from the wagon, and together they walked to the door. Reverend Thomas Matthews and his wife, Sarah, welcomed them with kind efficiency. The Reverend was perhaps 50, with thinning gray hair and gentle eyes that reminded Olivia of her father. Sarah, younger and plump, insisted on Olivia freshening up while Yannick spoke with her husband about the ceremony. In their washroom, Olivia studied herself in the mirror. At 23, she had what her mother had called sensible features, neither beautiful nor plain but somewhere practical in between. Her brown hair, currently pinned up for travel, tended toward waves when left loose. Her gray-green eyes were probably her best feature, though Thomas had once said he loved her capable hands most of all. Thomas. She sent a brief prayer toward his memory, hoping he would understand this choice. They'd had 3 good years together before illness claimed him. He'd been a clerk, careful and kind, and he'd never begrudged her unusual skills even when others found them strange. Sarah appeared in the doorway with a small bouquet of dried flowers and late-season roses. "Every bride should have flowers," she said warmly. "Don't look so frightened, dear." Yannick Walker is a good man. He's been alone since his parents passed 4 years ago, managing that ranch by himself and his hired hands. He'll treat you well. "Do you know him well?" Olivia asked. "As well as anyone in town." "He keeps to himself mostly, but he's honest in his dealings and fair with his workers. He donated money to build the new schoolhouse and never misses paying his accounts at the stores. He's just been lonely, I think. A ranch is no place for a man alone." Sarah adjusted the collar of Olivia's traveling dress and nodded with satisfaction. "You'll do fine together." The ceremony took place in the Matthews parlor, with Sarah and a neighbor woman serving as witnesses. Olivia's hands trembled as Yannick slipped a simple gold band onto her finger, but his steady presence beside her provided unexpected comfort. When Reverend Matthews pronounced them husband and wife, Yannick pressed a chaste kiss to her forehead. his lips warm against her skin. They signed the marriage certificate, and Sarah insisted on serving cake and tea before letting them depart. Olivia found herself answering questions about Boston and her journey, while Yannick spoke quietly with the Reverend about ranch matters. She caught him glancing at her several times, his expression thoughtful. The ride to the ranch took them northeast across rolling prairie land that stretched toward distant mountains. The afternoon sun painted everything golden, and despite her nervousness about the night ahead, Olivia felt something loosen in her chest. The sky here was enormous compared to Boston's crowded streets, and the air tasted clean and sharp. "It's beautiful," she said. Yannick nodded. "Different from the East. Some people find it too empty, too harsh, but it gets into your blood if you let it." He paused, then added, "If you hate it here, if this doesn't work, I won't keep you against your will. I'll arrange passage back to Boston if that's what you need." His words surprised her. "You do that. I want a wife, not a prisoner. I hope we can build something good together, but if we can't, there's no point in forcing misery on both of us." He glanced at her. "I won't lie and say I'm an easy man to live with. I'm used to my own ways, and ranch life is hard work, but I'll never raise a hand to you, and I'll provide the best I can." "That's more than many women have," Olivia said quietly. "I'll do my best to be a good wife, Mr. Walker." "Yannick," he corrected. "We're married now, Olivia." "We should at least use our given names." She tested his name on her tongue. "Yannick, it's unusual. My father was Belgian, came to America as a young man. He met my mother in Kansas, and they moved here when the ranch land opened up." He pointed ahead. "There, over that rise, that's home." The Walker ranch house came into view as they crested the hill, a solid structure built from local stone and timber with a wide porch facing south toward the mountains. Outbuildings dotted the property, including a large barn, a bunkhouse, and several smaller structures. Cattle grazed in fenced pastures, and she could see the silver ribbon of a creek cutting through the land. "It's substantial," she said, impressed despite herself. "We run about 800 head of cattle, sell beef to the railroad camps and military forts. I have 4 permanent hands and hire more during roundup and drive seasons." He pulled the wagon up to the house. "I told them to stay in the bunkhouse tonight, give us privacy. They'll meet you tomorrow." He carried her trunks into the house while she stood on the porch, taking in her new home. Inside, she found a main room with a stone fireplace, a kitchen with a cast iron stove, and 2 bedrooms. The furniture was masculine and sparse but well made and clean. Someone had left a pot of stew warming on the stove and fresh bread wrapped in cloth on the table. "My neighbor, Mrs. Chen, came by this morning to prepare supper," Yannick explained. "She and her husband have the ranch to the west. They're good people." He set her trunks in the larger bedroom, which held a substantial bed frame with a thick mattress, a wardrobe, and a dresser. "I'll sleep out here tonight if you prefer. Give you time to adjust." Olivia turned to face him, this stranger she'd married hours ago. He stood in the doorway, giving her space, and she saw something in his expression that looked like vulnerability beneath the weathered confidence. "We're married," she said. "There's no point in delaying the inevitable, but I'd appreciate some time to unpack and compose myself after supper." Relief flickered across his face. "Of course. I need to check on the horses anyway, feed the dogs. Take whatever time you need." They ate the stew in companionable silence, the food hearty and well-seasoned. Olivia found herself watching Yannick's hands as he tore bread, noting the scars and calluses that spoke of hard labor. He ate with surprising manners for a rancher, and she wondered about his parents, about what had shaped this quiet, careful man. "Tell me about your pens," he said suddenly. "How does one learn to make fountain pens?" She explained about her father's print shop, how he'd started crafting custom pens for wealthy clients who wanted something finer than standard dip pens. She described the process of shaping nibs, mixing inks, selecting materials for barrels and caps. As she spoke, his attention never wavered, and she realized he was genuinely interested. "I'd like to see you work sometime," he said, "if you'd allow it." "Really?" Most men found her craft odd at best, unwomanly at worst. A person should do what they're good at. If you can make money selling pens, that's practical. Besides, he hesitated, then continued, "I barely managed to finish 8th grade before my father needed me full-time on the ranch. I've always admired people who work with books and writing. Seems like a kind of magic to me." "It's just craft and practice," she said, but she felt warmth spread through her chest at his words. After supper, Yannick went to tend evening chores while Olivia unpacked her belongings. She hung her few dresses in the wardrobe and arranged her personal items on the dresser. Her pen-making tools and materials went on the small desk near the window, where morning light would be good for detailed work. She found a nightgown in her trunk, one of 2 she owned, and changed behind a screen in the corner. When Yannick returned, she was sitting on the edge of the bed, brushing out her hair. He paused in the doorway, and something shifted in his expression as he watched her. She set the brush aside and met his eyes. "I should tell you," she said quietly, "I was married before. My husband died 3 years ago. I know, you mentioned it in your letters." He moved into the room slowly, giving her time to object. "Does my knowing bother you? I just wanted to be clear that I understand what's expected tonight." He nodded and began unbuttoning his shirt. "I'll try to be gentle. If something hurts or frightens you, tell me." What followed was awkward at first, 2 strangers navigating intimacy with more courtesy than passion. But Yannick kept his word about gentleness, and his patience allowed her to relax enough that the experience, while strange with someone new, was not unpleasant. Afterward, he held her loosely, one arm draped across her waist, and she found the solid warmth of him oddly comforting. "Sleep well, Olivia," he murmured against her hair. "Good night, Yannick." She woke to pre-dawn darkness and the sound of Yannick dressing quietly. He noticed her stirring and said, "Morning chores. There's water in the pitcher if you want to wash. I'll be back for breakfast in about an hour." The routine of ranch life began to reveal itself over the following days. Yannick rose before dawn to tend livestock and handle various tasks with his ranch hands. Olivia met them that first Sunday. Miguel Alvarez, a Mexican cowboy in his 40s who'd worked for Yannick's father. James "Jimmy" Carson, a young man from Kansas learning the cattle business. Robert "Red" Murphy, an Irish immigrant with startling copper hair. And Samuel Chen, the nephew of the neighboring ranchers who helped out part-time while learning English. They treated her with polite respect, though she caught them exchanging glances when Yannick mentioned her pen-making. Mrs. Chen, a tiny woman from Guangdong province who spoke excellent English, visited that afternoon with her daughter Lynn to welcome Olivia properly. "Yannick is good man, Mrs. Chen said as they drank tea in the main room. "He help us when others in county not so friendly to Chinese families. He tell them we are good neighbors, good workers. Some men listen because Yannick is respected." Olivia learned that the Chens raised vegetables and chickens, selling their produce to La Junta's restaurants and general stores. Lynn, about 16, helped with the business and studied at the small schoolhouse when harvest season allowed. The girl's eyes went wide when Olivia showed her the fountain pens. "You made these yourself?" Lynn asked in wonder, holding a pen with a barrel Olivia had carved from maple wood. "My father taught me. Would you like one? For your schoolwork?" Lynn looked at her mother, who nodded permission. The girl's smile was radiant. "Thank you, Mrs. Walker, I will treasure it, After they left, Yannick found Olivia cleaning up the tea things. "That was kind of you," he said. "Lynn works hard at her studies." "She should have good tools," Olivia replied. "A pen is worthless if no one uses it." That evening, as they sat by the fireplace after supper, Yannick asked, "Would you write our story?" She looked up from the sock she was darning. "I'm sorry, our story. You're a widow who makes pens, and I'm a rancher who needed a wife. You came all the way from Boston to marry a stranger in Colorado. That seems like a story worth writing down." He looked almost embarrassed. "I just thought, maybe someday we'd have children and they'd want to know how we met, how we started." Something about his request touched her deeply. "I'd need paper. Good paper, not just rough sheets. We'll go to Morrison's store tomorrow. You can pick out whatever you need." He paused. "Pick out supplies for your pen business too. I want you to have what you need." The next morning they drove into La Junta together. Morrison's general store occupied a prime corner location, its windows displaying everything from hardware to fabrics. Mr. Morrison, a balding man with sharp eyes and a merchant's smile, greeted them warmly. "Heard you got yourself a bride, Walker. Welcome to La Junta, Mrs. Walker." Olivia selected writing paper, ink supplies, and various materials she needed for pen making. When they reached the counter, the total made her wince, but Yannick paid without hesitation. As Morrison counted out change, Olivia pulled one of her better pens from her pocket, the one with a rosewood barrel and brass fittings. "Mr. Morrison, I make these," she said, demonstrating the pen's smooth writing. "If you'd be interested in selling them in your store, I'd be happy to discuss terms." Morrison examined the pen critically, testing it on scrap paper. His expression shifted from skepticism to interest. "This writes better than anything I stock. You make these yourself." "My father trained me." "I can produce various styles and price points, depending on what your customers want." "Let me think on it," Morrison said, but his tone suggested real interest. "Leave this one with me to show folks. Come back in a week and we'll talk business." Outside, Yannick said, "You're a better merchant than you give yourself credit for." "I had to be after my husband died. His family tried to claim even the shop's contents. I learned to negotiate quickly." She climbed onto the wagon seat. "Thank you for the supplies. It's an investment. If you sell pens to Morrison, that's income for the ranch." He snapped the reins and the horses moved forward. "Besides, you should have what you need to practice your craft." They stopped at the post office, where Olivia mailed a letter to Mrs. Halloway, assuring her neighbor that she'd arrived safely and found her new husband kind. As they were leaving, a woman's voice called out, "Yannick Walker, that can't be your new bride." The woman approaching was perhaps 35, dressed in a fashionable blue dress that seemed too fine for La Junta's dusty streets. Her blonde hair was styled in elaborate curls, and her pretty face held sharp curiosity. "Mrs. Brennan," Yannick said neutrally. "May I introduce my wife, Olivia?" "Olivia, this is Constance Brennan. Her husband owns the hotel." "The Paradise Hotel," Constance corrected, extending a gloved hand. "How wonderful to meet you, my dear. We were all so surprised when Yannick announced he was bringing a bride from back east. You must tell me everything about Boston. We see so few cultured women out here." Something in her tone set Olivia's teeth on edge, but she smiled politely. "It's quite different from Colorado, certainly." "I imagine so. And what did you do back east? Before marrying, I mean." The question carried an edge of judgment. "I ran my late father's print shop and crafted custom fountain pens." Constance's laugh was musical and condescending. "How unusual. A woman in business. Well, I suppose circumstances drive us to all sorts of things. You must be relieved to leave all that behind and become a proper rancher's wife." "Actually, I plan to continue my work," Olivia said firmly. "Mr. Morrison may begin carrying my pens in his store. How ambitious!" Constance's smile didn't reach her eyes. "Well, I'm sure you'll find ranch life keeps you quite busy enough. Good day, Yannick. Do bring your bride to dinner at the hotel sometime. We host a monthly social for the better families." As they drove away, Yannick said, "Don't let Constance bother you. She grew up in Denver society and sometimes forgets that La Junta isn't. She seems very familiar with you. She tried to arrange a match between me and her younger sister last year. I declined. Some people don't take rejection gracefully." He glanced at her. "You handled her well. I've dealt with worse in Boston. At least here, I'm a married woman with some social standing. Back east, I was a widow in trade, which made me practically invisible to people like Mrs. Brennan." That evening, Olivia set up her pen-making workspace properly while Yannick worked on ranch accounts at the kitchen table. She found herself stealing glances at him as he bent over his ledgers, his brow furrowed in concentration. He caught her looking once and offered a small smile that made something flutter in her chest. "What?" he asked. "Nothing. Just thinking you look like a scholar, not a cowboy, when you're working with numbers. My mother insisted I learn properly. She taught school before marrying my father." He set down his pencil. "She would have liked you, I think. She always said a woman should be able to support herself if needed, that education and skills were as important as housekeeping. She sounds like a remarkable woman." She was. Lost her to fever, and my father followed 6 months later. Some people said he died of a broken heart, but I think it was just pneumonia that he didn't fight very hard. Yannick's voice held old grief. They were deeply in love, even after 25 years together. I always hoped to find something like what they had. The vulnerability in his admission made Olivia cross the room to stand beside him. She placed her hand on his shoulder, feeling the solid warmth of him through his shirt. "I hope we can build something good together, Yannick." He covered her hand with his. "I hope so too." The weeks that followed established a rhythm to their lives. Olivia spent mornings on household tasks and afternoons crafting pens, while Yannick managed ranch operations. He often came to her workshop space in the evenings, watching her work with genuine fascination. She found herself explaining techniques and showing him how different nib cuts affected writing styles. "Try it," she said one night, handing him a newly finished pen. "Write something." His hand dwarfed the pen, but he held it carefully, practicing strokes on scrap paper. His handwriting was better than she'd expected, clear and deliberate if not particularly elegant. "It feels different from a regular pen," he said. "Smoother." "That's the point. The ink flows from the reservoir through capillary action, so you don't need to keep dipping. For someone writing letters or keeping accounts, it's much more efficient." She moved closer, adjusting his grip slightly. "Hold it at this angle. There, see how much better that flows." He practiced a few more lines, then wrote carefully, "Olivia Walker, pen maker and wife." He showed it to her. "Our story is starting, isn't it?" "I believe it is." He kissed her then, a real kiss that held warmth and growing affection rather than just duty. When they made love that night, it was less awkward, more genuine, and afterward, Olivia lay awake listening to his steady breathing and realized she was beginning to care for this quiet, thoughtful man. Morrison agreed to stock her pens on consignment, taking 3 different models to test customer interest. Within 2 weeks, he ordered a dozen more. Word spread about the quality of her work, and she started receiving direct orders from townspeople. The school teacher, Miss Martha Evans, commissioned a special set for her best students. Even Reverend Matthews ordered a fine pen for correspondence with his denominational headquarters. Olivia's fingers were often stained with ink, and she continued her habit of testing nibs with her tongue, which left her lips perpetually tinted. Yannick started calling her his ink-stained bride, with affection rather than criticism in his voice. November brought the first serious snow, blanketing the ranch in white and slowing outside work. The cattle required extra care in cold weather, and Yannick spent long days ensuring they had access to feed and water. Olivia helped where she could, learning to manage the household aspects of ranch life with growing competence. Mrs. Chen taught her to preserve vegetables and prepare hearty meals suited to feeding working men. Sarah Matthews invited her to join the town's women's auxiliary, which met weekly to work on quilts and other projects for community benefit. Olivia found herself gradually becoming part of La Junta's social fabric, though Constance Brennan remained coolly polite whenever they encountered each other. On a particularly cold December evening, Yannick came in from feeding cattle to find Olivia sitting by the fire, writing in a leather journal. He poured coffee and settled beside her. "Working on our story?" he asked, trying to. "I'm not sure I'm any good at narrative writing. I can describe pen-making techniques in detail, but storytelling is different." She showed him the pages filled with her neat handwriting. "I keep wanting to just list facts rather than make it interesting. Read me what you have." She read aloud her account of answering his advertisement, the journey west, their wedding day and early weeks of marriage. Her prose was straightforward and honest, perhaps not literary but genuine. "It's good," Yannick said when she finished. "It sounds like you, like us." He took the journal from her hands. "May I add something?" "Of course." He wrote slowly, his letters careful. "I was afraid she would find me too rough, too plain for a woman from Boston who made beautiful things with her hands. But she looked at me with those gray-green eyes and didn't seem disappointed. That gave me hope." Olivia read his words, her throat tight with emotion. "You weren't what I expected either. Better, I mean, kinder than I had any right to hope for. We're lucky, then, to have found each other." He set the journal aside and pulled her close. "I care for you, Olivia, more than I expected to this quickly." "I care for you too," she admitted, the truth of it startling and wonderful simultaneously. They made love there by the fireplace, the flames casting golden light across their joined bodies, and Olivia felt the last of her reservations crumble away. This marriage that had started as convenience and necessity was becoming something real and precious. Christmas came with a community celebration at the church. Olivia gave Yannick a specially crafted pen made from dark walnut with silver fittings, engraved with his initials. He gave her a necklace that had belonged to his mother, a simple gold chain with a small locket containing photographs of his parents. "Are you sure?" she asked, knowing what the gift meant. "My mother would want you to have it. Your family now." He fastened it around her neck. "I love you, Olivia." The words, spoken quietly but firmly, made her eyes fill with tears. "I love you too, Yannick. I wasn't sure I could love again after Thomas, but you've made me feel alive in ways I'd forgotten." The new year of 1883 arrived with bitter cold and heavy snows that kept them mostly housebound. They spent long evenings by the fire, reading aloud to each other, working on the journal that chronicled their growing love, and simply being together. Yannick taught her to play chess, and she discovered he was a formidable opponent. She taught him about different writing styles and literature, lending him books she'd brought from Boston. "I wish I'd had more schooling," he said one night as they discussed a novel they'd been reading. "There's so much I don't know." "You're one of the most intelligent men I've known," Olivia countered. "You understand animal husbandry, weather patterns, business management, and 100 other practical things that books don't teach. Besides, you're learning now. Education doesn't have to end at a certain age." He looked at her with such warmth that she felt it like a physical touch. "How did I get so lucky?" "We both got lucky," she corrected. February brought a crisis when Red Murphy returned from checking the northern pastures with news that rustlers had made off with at least 20 head of cattle. Yannick organized the ranch hands immediately, preparing to track the thieves. "I want you to stay in the house with the doors locked," he told Olivia as he loaded his rifle. "Jimmy will stay here to guard the property. We should be back by tomorrow night, but if we're not, ride into town and get the sheriff." Fear clutched at Olivia's heart. "Be careful, please." He kissed her hard. "I will. I have too much to come home to now." She watched him ride out with Miguel, Red, and Samuel, her stomach churning with worry. The next 36 hours dragged by in agonizing slowness. She tried to focus on pen making, but found herself constantly checking the window for signs of riders returning. When they finally appeared, all 4 men were accounted for but exhausted and cold. They tracked the rustlers to a camp near the Colorado-New Mexico border, and, with the help of a sheriff's posse from Las Animas County, had recovered the cattle and arrested 3 men involved in a larger rustling operation. Olivia met Yannick at the door, relief flooding through her as she verified he was unharmed. She helped him remove his coat and boots, noting the weariness etched in his face. "I kept thinking about you the whole time," he said as she guided him to a chair by the fire. "About coming home to you. You're here now. That's what matters." She brought him hot coffee and stew, fussing over him until he caught her hand. "Olivia, I know we married for practical reasons, but somewhere along the way you became everything to me. My partner, my love, my home. I needed you to know that." She knelt beside his chair. "You've become everything to me too. I was so frightened something would happen to you, the thought of losing you." Her voice broke. He pulled her into his lap, holding her close. "I'm not going anywhere. We're building a life together, you and I. Nothing's going to stop that." Spring arrived with the usual chaos of calving season and preparations for Roundup. Olivia found herself busier than ever, managing the household, filling orders for pens, and helping where she could with ranch work. Mrs. Chen taught her to ride properly so she could deliver meals to the men working distant pastures. One warm May afternoon, Olivia realized her monthly courses were late. She waited another week before mentioning it to Yannick, afraid to get his hopes up or her own. "I think I might be with child," she said quietly as they sat on the porch watching the sunset paint the mountains pink and gold. His hand found hers, gripping tightly. "Are you sure?" "Not completely, but all the signs are there. The way I felt with Thomas. It's similar." She turned to look at him. "How do you feel about that?" Terrified, hopeful, excited. He laughed shakily. "All of it at once. A child, Olivia, our child." They told no one until she was certain, waiting until June when her condition became obvious to share the news. Mrs. Chen was thrilled, immediately offering advice and help. Sarah Matthews organized the Women's Auxiliary to prepare baby clothes and supplies. Even Constance Brennan offered stiff congratulations, though her eyes held something Olivia couldn't quite read. The pregnancy progressed normally through the summer heat. Olivia continued her pen making as long as she could work comfortably, building up inventory for the months after the baby's arrival. Yannick became almost comically protective, worrying over everything from her diet to whether she was resting enough. "I survived 3 years as a widow running a business," she reminded him gently. "I'm not made of glass. I know, but I can't help worrying. You're precious to me, Olivia. You and our child." He rested his hand on her swelling belly. "I want you both safe. We will be. Women have been having babies since the dawn of time." But she was touched by his concern, by the way he ensured she had everything she needed and never complained about the ways pregnancy affected their physical intimacy. She continued working on their story, filling page after page with accounts of their first year together. She wrote about their wedding, the development of her pen business, the cattle rustlers, discovering her pregnancy, and the countless small moments that had built their love. Yannick added his own entries occasionally, his straightforward prose recording his perspective on their shared experiences. Labor started on a cold January night in 1884, 2 weeks before Olivia's expected date. Yannick rode frantically to fetch Mrs. Chen while Sarah Matthews, who'd agreed to serve as midwife, arrived with her medical supplies and calm competence. The labor was long and difficult, lasting through the night and into the next afternoon. Yannick paced the main room, listening to Olivia's cries with growing anguish. Miguel had to physically restrain him from bursting into the bedroom several times. "Let the women work," the older man said firmly. "Your wife is strong, she will prevail." Finally, as the sun began its descent toward the mountains, a baby's cry pierced the air. Sarah emerged minutes later, exhausted but smiling. "You have a son, Yannick, a big, healthy boy." "Your wife did beautifully." He rushed past her to find Olivia pale and exhausted but alive, cradling a red-faced infant wrapped in blankets. She looked up at him with tired joy. "We have a son," she whispered. "Yannick, we have a son." He knelt beside the bed, touching the baby's tiny hand with one finger. The infant's fingers curled around his, gripping with surprising strength. "He's perfect. You're perfect. God, Olivia, I was so frightened." "I know. I could hear you pacing even through the pain." She smiled weakly. "But I'm fine and he's fine, and we're a family now." They named him Jacob Thomas Walker, honoring both Yannick's father and Olivia's first husband. The gesture touched Yannick deeply, his acceptance of her past made tangible in their son's name. The first months of parenthood were exhausting and wonderful simultaneously. Jacob was a demanding baby who didn't sleep well, keeping them both awake through long nights. But watching Yannick hold their son, singing Belgian lullabies his mother had taught him, made Olivia fall even deeper in love with her husband. She returned to pen making gradually as Jacob's schedule became more predictable. Morrison reported that demand for her pens had grown during her absence, with customers asking when she'd have new inventory. She worked during Jacob's naps, finding the familiar craft soothing after the chaos of new motherhood. One afternoon, when Jacob was about 6 months old, Yannick came into her workshop carrying the leather journal that held their story. "I've been thinking," he said. "We should keep writing this, keep recording everything. Jacob's birth, watching him grow, everything that happens. So someday he'll know exactly how much he was wanted, how much love built this family." Olivia set down the pen she'd been working on. "That's a beautiful idea. Will you write it? You're better with words than I am. We'll write it together. Your voice matters as much as mine in this story." They fell into a new routine. After Jacob went to sleep for the night, they would sit together and add to their journal. Olivia wrote most of the entries, but Yannick added his own observations and feelings. The journal became a treasure, a record of their transformation from strangers to lovers to parents. As Jacob grew, so did the ranch's prosperity. The cattle operation expanded, and Yannick hired 2 more permanent hands. Olivia's pen business thrived, with orders coming from as far as Denver and even a few from back east. She trained Lin Chen, now 18, to help with simpler aspects of production, giving the girl a skill that could support her. Life wasn't without challenges. A hard winter in 1885 killed several head of cattle, despite everyone's best efforts. Jacob fell seriously ill with croup that same winter, and they spent terrifying nights waiting for the fever to break. Constance Brennan started spreading rumors that Olivia's business pursuits made her neglectful of her wifely duties. Though most people dismissed the gossip, through it all, Yannick and Olivia's love deepened. They'd built something solid and true from the fragile beginning of a mail-order marriage. They knew each other's strengths and weaknesses, supported each other's dreams, and faced challenges as partners. On their fourth wedding anniversary in October 1886, Yannick surprised Olivia with a gift, a beautiful roll-top desk made from cherry wood, with specialized compartments designed specifically for her pen-making supplies. "Miguel's brother is a carpenter in Santa Fe," Yannick explained as she ran her hands over the smooth wood in wonder. "I sent him drawings of what you needed and he built this. Took him 3 months. Yannick, this must have cost a fortune. You're worth it. Your work is important and you deserve proper equipment." He opened one of the small drawers, revealing her name engraved inside. "Besides, I figure we'll use this desk for 50 or 60 years, so it's an investment." She threw her arms around him, overwhelmed by his thoughtfulness. "I love you so much. Sometimes I still can't believe how lucky I am that you answered my letter. I answered your letter because you were honest about who you were and what you wanted. You didn't try to pretend to be something you weren't." He kissed her temple. "And I'm the lucky one. You gave me love, a son, and a real home. Everything I have that matters." That night, they made love with the passion and intimacy of a long-married couple who still desired each other deeply. Afterward, lying tangled together in the darkness, Olivia said, "I want another child." "Yeah." Yannick's hand traced lazy patterns on her shoulder. "Jacob should have siblings, and I love being a mother even with all the hard parts." She paused. "If you want more children too, I want everything with you. More children growing old together, watching our family grow." He pulled her closer. "Let's have a big, noisy family that fills this house with love." Their second child, a daughter they named Grace Elizabeth, arrived in the summer of 1887. She was an easier baby than Jacob had been, content and smiley from early on. Jacob, now 3.5, was fascinated by his baby sister, constantly wanting to help care for her. Olivia managed motherhood and her business with growing confidence, helped by Lin Chen, who'd become her unofficial apprentice and helper. The young woman had a natural gift for the detailed work required in pen making, and Olivia found herself teaching Lin everything her father had taught her. "You could do this professionally," Olivia told Lin one afternoon as they worked together. "You have the skill and the patience." Lin ducked her head shyly. "My parents want me to marry soon, make a good match with a Chinese merchant in Denver." "What do you want?" "I want to keep learning," Lin admitted. "I want to make beautiful things and support myself, but family duty is important in our culture." Olivia understood the conflict, remembering her own struggles with societal expectations. "Perhaps there's a middle way, someone who would value your skills as well as your family background." As it turned out, fate intervened in the form of David Yates, a young teacher who'd taken a position at La Junta's expanding school. He noticed Lin's intelligence and asked permission to tutor her in advanced subjects. The tutoring sessions led to friendship, which blossomed into love. David, whose own parents were Methodist missionaries, valued education and women's capabilities. The Chens approved the match, pleased their daughter had found someone who respected her abilities. Lin and David married in the spring of 1888, and they built a small cottage near the schoolhouse where Lin established her own pen-making workshop. She and Olivia formed a business partnership, with Lin handling the simpler production while Olivia focused on custom orders and new designs. The arrangement benefited both families financially and gave Olivia more time with her children. Jacob started school that fall, bright and curious like both his parents. Grace grew into a cheerful toddler who followed her father around the ranch whenever possible. Yannick was a wonderful father, patient and playful, teaching his children about the land and animals while encouraging their individual interests. Life settled into a comfortable rhythm. The ranch prospered under Yannick's careful management. Olivia's pens gained recognition throughout Colorado and neighboring territories, with some of her finest work commissioned by wealthy clients as far away as San Francisco. The journal recording their story grew thicker, filled with accounts of their expanding family and shared experiences. In 1889, Olivia discovered she was pregnant again. This pregnancy was harder than the previous two, leaving her tired and nauseous well into the 4th month. Yannick took over more household duties and hired a woman from town to help with cleaning and cooking. "You're doing too much," he told her firmly when she protested. "You're growing our child, managing a business and raising 2 active children. Accept help when it's offered." Their 3rd child, another son they named Samuel Chen Walker to honor their dear friends and neighbors, arrived in early 1890. He was a colicky baby who kept the entire household awake for the first 3 months, but eventually settled into a sweeter disposition. The 1890s brought changes to La Junta and the Walker family. The town grew as the railroad brought more commerce and settlers. New businesses opened, including a proper bank and a second hotel. The school expanded to accommodate more students, and a small library opened in a donated building. Jacob showed an early aptitude for drawing and writing, often filling pages with stories illustrated with careful sketches. Grace proved fearless, more interested in horses and cattle than domestic pursuits. Samuel was still too young to show distinct personality, but he was affectionate and quick to smile. Olivia taught all her children to read early, surrounding them with books and encouraging curiosity. Yannick taught them about the land, about responsible stewardship of animals and resources, about the value of hard work balanced with rest and play. On a warm June evening in 1893, as they sat on the porch watching their children play in the yard, Yannick said, "Remember when you first arrived? You had ink on your tongue from testing pens, and you were so nervous." Olivia laughed. "I was terrified you'd take one look at me and send me back to Boston. I took one look at you and thought you were the bravest person I'd ever met. Coming all this way to marry a stranger, ready to build a new life from nothing." He took her hand. "Best decision I ever made writing that advertisement. Best decision I ever made answering it." She leaned against his shoulder. "We've built something good, haven't we? Something real and lasting. We've built everything." He gestured toward their children, the ranch spreading before them, the mountains rising in the distance. "This is our story, Olivia, the one you're writing down for them. Love and partnership and family." That night, they added a new entry to their journal, now Volume 3 in a series that chronicled their decade together. Olivia wrote about the evening's conversation, about the satisfaction of seeing their children healthy and happy, about the deep contentment she felt in the life they'd created. The following years brought the usual mix of joy and challenge. Jacob entered adolescence, growing tall and thoughtful, showing real talent for both art and writing. Grace remained adventurous, learning to ride and rope as well as any ranch hand. Samuel proved mechanically inclined, fascinated by how things worked and determined to take apart everything he could reach. In 1895, Olivia received a letter from Boston informing her that Thomas's family wanted to make amends for their past treatment. They'd prospered and felt guilty about how they'd treated her after his death. They offered financial compensation and an apology. "What do you want to do?" Yannick asked after reading the letter. "I don't need their money, and I'm not sure I need their apology after all these years." She thought about it, but maybe closure would be good, for both sides. She wrote back, accepting their apology but declining the money. Instead, she asked them to donate it to a widow's charity in Boston. The exchange of letters brought an unexpected peace, laying to rest old hurts and allowing her to fully embrace her present without shadows from her past. The turn of the century in 1900 felt momentous. Jacob was 16 and talking about attending university in Denver to study journalism. Grace, 14, remained determined to be involved in ranch management despite societal expectations about women's roles. Samuel, 10, had announced he wanted to be an engineer. Yannick and Olivia, now in their early 40s, looked at their nearly grown children with mixed pride and melancholy. Time had moved so quickly, transforming that nervous mail-order bride and lonely rancher into a partnership that had weathered every storm. "Do you ever regret it?" Olivia asked one night as they prepared for bed. "Taking a chance on a stranger?" "Never. Not once." Yannick pulled her close. "You gave me everything I didn't know I was missing. Love, family, partnership. You made me whole. You did the same for me. After Thomas died, I thought that part of my life was over, but you showed me I could love again, could build something new without forgetting what came before." She kissed him softly. "Thank you for seeing me, Yannick, for valuing what I could do instead of trying to change me." "How could I not value you? You're brilliant and talented and strong," he smiled. "Plus you make the best fountain pens in Colorado, which makes you very useful to have around." She laughed and swatted his shoulder. "Useful? That's romantic. I'm a practical man. I married a practical woman. We made a practical decision that turned into the greatest love story I could imagine." He grew serious. "But truly, Olivia, you are everything to me. You always will be." They made love with the comfortable passion of long partnership, bodies familiar but desire undiminished. Afterward, Olivia lay awake thinking about their journey. From strangers to spouses to lovers to parents, they'd built a life neither could have imagined when they'd first exchanged letters. In 1902, Jacob left for university in Denver, pursuing his dream of becoming a journalist. His departure left a hole in the household, though he wrote frequent letters filled with observations about city life and his studies. Grace had begun courting the son of a neighboring rancher, a young man named Michael who wisely recognized her capabilities and seemed genuinely interested in partnership rather than dominance. Samuel continued tinkering with everything mechanical, showing the same focused intensity his mother brought to pen-making. He'd begun helping maintain the ranch equipment, often improving designs with simple modifications. Olivia and Lynn's pen business had evolved into a small factory in La Junta, employing 6 workers and shipping products across the western states. Olivia had trained several people in the craft, ensuring her father's legacy would continue beyond her own work. The journal project had grown to 7 volumes, a detailed record of their family's history. Yannick and Olivia had maintained the practice of writing regular entries, documenting not just major events, but also the small moments that defined their love. Morning coffee shared in comfortable silence, late-night conversations about their hopes and fears, the 1,000 tiny gestures of care that sustained their marriage. In 1905, Jacob returned from Denver with his degree and a position at a Denver newspaper. He also brought a fiancée, a school teacher named Margaret who shared his intellectual curiosity and passion for social justice. They married that summer in a ceremony at La Junta's church, surrounded by family and friends. Grace married Michael in 1906, and they built a house on land that connected the Walker and Harrison ranches. True to her nature, Grace remained actively involved in cattle operations, eventually becoming as skilled as any man in the business. Michael proved a worthy partner, respecting her abilities while contributing his own considerable skills. Samuel left for engineering school in 1908, determined to work on the new electrical systems being installed throughout the West. His letters home filled pages with technical details that made Yannick shake his head in amused bewilderment. But Olivia understood her son's excitement about innovation and progress. As their children built independent lives, Yannick and Olivia rediscovered aspects of their relationship that had been subsumed by active parenting. They took long rides across ranch land, reclaiming time for just the two of them. They traveled to Denver to visit Jacob and attended theater performances and art exhibitions. They expanded the house, adding a proper library and a larger workshop for Olivia's continued pen-making. "We're grandparents now," Yannick said one evening in 1910, holding his first grandchild, Jacob's son, Henry. "When did we get old enough for that?" "We're not old," Olivia protested, though silver now streaked both their hair. "We're seasoned." "Seasoned," he repeated with a laugh. "I like that better." He gazed at the baby with wonder. Another generation, another chapter in our story. Indeed, the 1910s brought multiple grandchildren as their 3 children started families. Jacob and Margaret had 3 children. Grace and Michael had 4, much to Grace's amused exasperation. Samuel married a fellow engineer named Charlotte, and they had twin daughters. Olivia filled new journals with accounts of grandchildren and the evolution of their family. She wrote about watching Yannick teach the grandchildren to ride, just as he'd taught their own children. She wrote about family gatherings that filled the ranch house with noise and laughter and love. The ranch continued to prosper under Yannick's management, though he gradually turned over more responsibility to Grace and Michael. Olivia's pen business remained successful, though she too delegated much of the production to trained workers while focusing on custom designs and mentoring young craftspeople. In 1915, as they approached their 33rd wedding anniversary, Yannick suggested they take a trip to Belgium to visit his father's homeland. It was something he'd always wanted to do, and with the children grown and the ranch well managed by Grace and Michael, the timing seemed right. They spent 3 months traveling through Europe, seeing the landscapes Yannick's father had described in stories. They visited the village where the Walker family originated, met distant cousins, and immersed themselves in history and culture. The trip was a second honeymoon of sorts, reminding them of their capacity for adventure even in their 50s. They returned to La Junta in late 1915, refreshed and full of stories. The journals now included detailed accounts of their travels, illustrated with postcards and photographs. The United States' entry into World War I in 1917 brought anxiety as Jacob enlisted despite having children, feeling obligated to serve. They spent the war years worried about their eldest son, relieved when he returned home safely in 1919, though changed by what he'd witnessed. The 1920s brought more changes. The ranch adopted new technologies, including automobiles and tractors. La Junta continued growing, though it remained smaller than larger Colorado cities. The pen business adapted to changing markets, with Olivia designing models suited to the faster pace of modern life while maintaining the quality that had built her reputation. Yannick's health began showing signs of age in his 60s, though he remained active in ranch management. Olivia developed arthritis in her hands, making detailed pen work more difficult. She trained her granddaughter Alice, Grace's eldest, who showed remarkable aptitude for the craft. "Just like you trained me," Lin Chen said during one of their regular tea visits. Both women were now in their 60s, their hair gray but their friendship as strong as ever. The skill passes to the next generation. "As it should," Olivia agreed. My father would be pleased to know his craft continues. On their 50th wedding anniversary in 1932, the family organized a massive celebration. All three children and their families returned to the ranch, along with friends from throughout the region. Miguel Alvarez, now elderly but still sharp, gave a toast recounting Yannick's nervousness when he'd first told his ranch hands about sending for a mail-order bride. "I told him, boss, what if she can't cook? What if she's mean? What if she's ugly?" Miguel said to general laughter. And he said, "I'm trusting that she's honest like her letters and we'll figure out the rest." Best trust he ever placed. Yannick stood, pulling Olivia up beside him. 50 years ago, a brave woman traveled from Boston to marry a stranger in Colorado. She had ink on her tongue from testing the pens she made, and I thought she was the most remarkable person I'd ever met. I was right. He turned to face her directly. "Olivia, you are my great love, my partner in everything, the foundation of every good thing in my life. Thank you for writing our story with me." She kissed him as their family and friends applauded, tears streaming down her face. "Thank you for giving me a story worth writing." The celebration continued long into the night, with music and dancing and storytelling. Children and grandchildren took turns reading from the journals that chronicled Yannick and Olivia's life together, sharing the history with the youngest generation, who'd never heard all the details. The 1930s were quieter years. The Great Depression affected everyone, but the ranch's diversified operations and Olivia's established pen business helped the family weather economic hardship better than many. They helped neighbors where they could, remembering their own struggles and the community support that had welcomed Olivia decades earlier. Yannick's health declined more seriously in 1936, a heart condition limiting his activities. He spent more time in the house, often sitting in the library reading or watching Olivia work in her nearby workshop. They talked about their life together, reminiscing about the journey from awkward strangers to this deep, abiding love. "No regrets," he told her one autumn afternoon as they sat on the porch watching the mountains turn gold and crimson with changing aspens. "If I could go back and choose again, I'd choose you every time." "As would I," she said, gripping his hand tightly. "You gave me everything, Yannick. Love, family, purpose, home. Everything that matters." He passed away peacefully in his sleep in January 1937, Olivia beside him. He was 75 years old and they'd had 54 years together. The grief nearly broke her, the loss of her partner and great love leaving a hole nothing could fill. But surrounded by children, grandchildren, and great-grandchildren, Olivia found strength to continue. She'd learned from losing Thomas that grief and love were two sides of the same coin, that the pain of loss testified to the depth of what had been shared. She continued living on the ranch, which Grace and Michael managed with the same care Yannick had shown. She kept making pens, finding solace in the familiar craft, and she continued writing in their journals, now addressing entries to Yannick as if he could still read them. "Today I taught little Grace, our great-granddaughter, how to hold a pen properly," she wrote on a spring day in 1938. "She has your eyes, my love. That same serious focus when she's learning something new. The family you started continues growing, and they all know your story, our story, the legacy of love we built together." She lived 10 more years, maintaining her sharpness and vigor into her 80s. She saw the world change dramatically, from the wildness of the 1880s west to the modern complexities of the 1940s. She witnessed World War II, worried about grandchildren in service, and celebrated when they returned home safely. In the spring of 1947, Olivia gathered the family for what she sensed would be her final time. All of Yannick's and her descendants came to the ranch, filling the house with life and love just as they'd always dreamed. "I want you to have these," she told them, presenting the complete set of journals, now 12 volumes covering 65 years. "This is your history. The story of how a mail-order bride from Boston and a lonely Colorado rancher built a family from nothing but hope and determination and love. Remember that real love isn't just passion and romance, though we had that too. Real love is partnership, choosing each other every day, building something together that outlasts you both." She looked around at the faces surrounding her, seeing echoes of Yannick in features and expressions. "He told me once to write our story. I did. And now you're all part of it, carrying it forward into the future." Olivia Bennett Walker passed away peacefully that June, surrounded by family in the home she and Yannick had built together. She was 88 years old. They buried her beside Yannick on a hillside overlooking the ranch, the mountains standing eternal witness to the love story that had unfolded in their shadow. The family maintained the ranch for generations, keeping the journals carefully preserved. Olivia's pen-making legacy continued through multiple descendants who learned the craft. The house became something of a family museum, filled with artifacts from that first brave journey west and the life built from it. And in a glass case in the ranch house's library, positioned where sunlight illuminated it each morning, rested the very first pen Olivia had made in Colorado. The one she'd been testing that day. Yannick met her at the train station, her tongue stained with ink and her heart full of hope. Beside it lay an open journal, its pages showing two different handwritings intertwined, telling the story of how strangers became partners, became lovers, became family, all through the simple decision to trust, to hope, and to write their story together. The inscription on the case read, "Olivia Bennett and Yannick Walker, married October 1882 in La Junta, Colorado, a mail-order bride who made pens and tested them with her tongue. A cowboy who said, 'Write our story,' and so she did." Their great-great-grandchildren still visited the ranch, still read the journals, still heard the stories of how love could grow from the smallest seeds when tended with care, respect, and unwavering commitment. The story Olivia wrote became family legend, a testament to the power of taking chances, of building bridges across differences, of choosing partnership over pride. And sometimes, on quiet evenings when the wind swept down from the mountains across the prairie, visitors swore they could feel the presence of that love story still echoing through the land, as permanent and enduring as the mountains themselves, as precious and unique as a handcrafted pen made by skilled and loving hands. The ranch continued operating well into the 21st century, still owned by Walker descendants who honored the legacy of those who'd started it all with nothing but faith and determination. The pen-making business evolved but never disappeared, each generation maintaining the craft that had given Olivia independence and purpose. But more than land or business, what endured was the story itself. The tale of two people who'd started as names on paper, who'd built a life from letters and hope, who'd proven that love could be both practical and profound, both chosen and deeply felt. Yannick and Olivia's story became part of La Junta's history, representative of countless similar stories throughout the West, where people took chances on unknown futures and built something lasting. It was a story of courage and compromise, of respect and partnership, of two people who looked past society's expectations to see each other clearly and love what they found. And at its heart, it remained the story of a woman who made beautiful pens and a man who asked her to write their story, and the extraordinary love that grew from that simple request.